Roar!
Chapter 22. Gliding over one of the palace towers, Celestia pulled herself upright and flared her wings. With a few powerful flaps, she controlled her descent and landed gracefully on the castle's front steps. About a minute later, Luna trotted up to her from inside the castle.
Shining armor, scrambling squad.
She stated upon reaching Celestia's side.
They'll arrive by chariot in 3 hours.
Then we'll be at the Galloping Ghost Islands by dusk time. We may be in for a long day.
I understand.
Luna nodded.
Do you think Stephen will be okay?
Before Celestia could answer, Stephen's voice cried out.
Closing my eyes didn't work!
From beyond the courtyard wall, the princesses exchanged surprised glances for a split second before bolting towards the castle gates. Stephen's world spun and he toppled over. A moment later, Ernest's voice entered his ears.
Buck up, my boy. You'll be all right.
Ernest chuckled.
But this is where we part ways. I wish you the best of luck.
There was the sound of an electric pop, and Stephen no longer felt Ernest's presence beside him. After a few seconds, Stephen put his leg under himself and was about to stand up.
What hast thou done?
Ah!
Stephen shrieked painfully, while grasping at his head and rolling away from the blaring megaphone that had been placed in his left ear. Ringing ears rattled on top of his pounding head, crossed eyes, racing heart, shifting stomach, as he lay down and covered his head for protection. Peeking up through 4 legs and unfocused eyes, he saw a tall white figure loom over a slightly shorter blue figure, causing the blue figure to shrink a little. Something was said, but the whole world sounded like high-pitched buzzing. After a second, the ringing died down, and Stephen's eyes focused on Celestia as she leaned down.
Are you all right?
She asked compassionately, sounding as if she was speaking from a distance. Stephen tried to reassure the princess by nodding, but nodding was a motion that the light-headed wasn't ready for, and he ended up plopping his muzzle into the ground.
Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but me.
Stephen unconsciously sang into the grass. Luna's eyes shot open.
Sister, he's under mind control.
Her horn lit up.
I shall retrieve him through his dreams.
Celestia stopped Luna and shook her head.
Just give him a minute. Long-distance teleportation takes a little getting used to, and I don't think he was in great shape to begin with.
We're here, Princess. When do we leave?
Twilight's voice came from behind. The princesses turned around to see the 6 ponies galloping towards them, only to stop when they saw Stephen sprawled out and motionless on the ground. Wide eyes and gaping jaws came to most of their faces. Fluttershy looked away while Pinkie Pie inched forwards.
Is he?
We believe he's had a rough trip from the Galloping Ghost Islands.
Luna said reassuringly. A muttered,
I can do this.
Came from Stephen's direction and he began to stir. The pegasus rushed over to help him up. Shaking his head, the last of the ringing cleared from his ears, although his head still ached and his eyes were still slightly fuzzy. This was probably going to be a part of him at least until he could actually get some sleep.
Which one of you had the megaphone?
He asked dizzily.
My apologies. I was nervous for the situation and forgot myself.
Luna said in a quiet and compassionate voice.
That's understandable, I guess.
Stephen said, a hint of ire escaping unintentionally.
What was your question again?
I meant to ask if you had turned the key.
Steve could feel all set of 8 eyes fixated upon him.
So, you know about that?
He asked before shaking his head.
No, I didn't.
The whole group breathed a sigh of relief.
You were taken before we could explain what you were wanted for. I was afraid he might have convinced you to help him.
That guy is out of his mind if he thinks I'm going to help him.
We were just about to head out after you.
Did he tell you what he's up to?
Rainbow asked.
Yeah.
Said Stephen as he stood up.
He wants to amass an army of titans to help him build a 100-square-mile palace for the princesses.
7 sets of startled and confused faces turned to Celestia, who closed her eyes and gave a reminiscent huff.
But why?
Twilight asked.
Or how?
Rarity continued as they tried to grasp the implications. Rainbow spoke up.
We'll worry about that later.
She turned back to Stephen.
So, whose butt needs to get kicked for all this, Stephen?
Stephen turned to Pinkie Pie.
Pinkie, remember last week when we met a unicorn named Ernest?
Pinkie nodded happily.
Of course I remember him. He's the adventurer pony with the bright green eyes and the candy cane mane.
She said, fluttering her eyes and pulling back her mane into a shape similar to Ernest, before letting it spring back to its original form.
Actually, he's the dragon pony that robbed 3 museums, dropped me in the Everfree Forest, and took us for a ride a few days ago.
Really?
She asked curiously.
I wonder why he didn't talk to you about it when we met him in Ponyville.
I know, right?
Stephen groaned.
So what's the plan now?
Rarity asked.
We leave as soon as Shining Armor gets here, right?
Celestia shook her head.
We'll leave first thing in the morning. In the meantime, is any pony ready for lunch?
6 heads nodded in reply as they began to follow the princesses towards the castle. The mention of lunch made Stephen's stomach growl.
You have no idea. I could eat a
Stephen caught himself just in time before covering his mouth and faking a cough to hide it. He had no idea if Equestria had figures of speech like that, or what the implications they might have had if they did. But he wasn't going to risk it, especially in the presence of royalty. Rarity and Applejack turned around.
Were you about to say something there?
Rarity asked. Stephen cleared his throat one more time.
Never mind me.
He said nonchalantly, as possible. Applejack gave him a questioning look, before shrugging and continuing into the palace. The princesses led the ponies into the dining hall, where they took their seats at a long table. Celestia sat at the head with Luna on her right, and Twilight on her left. Stephen sat in between Luna, Fluttershy, and Rarity with Twilight, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Pinkie Pie sat across from them. A dark blue unicorn, waiter, in a suit, took their orders with a floating quill and notepad. Though he noticed the food between the 2 worlds were similar, the fact remained that Stephen ate a wildflower sandwiches 2 days ago. Not entirely certain what to order, he asked.
What do you have?
Anything you desire.
The waiter responded in a posh voice. Stephen's stomach growled in a language that only he could understand and decided to try his luck.
I'd like a bean burrito, stuffed with lettuce, red peppers, cheese, sour cream, and lots of hot sauce.
To his surprise, the waiter simply nodded and wrote down the order.
A big leafy salad with ranch dressing.
The waiter nodded again.
A glass of milk.
Coming right up, sir. That's quite the appetite you have there, Stefan.
Celestia said gleefully. Stephen chuckled nervously.
Sorry if it was too much. Eating a lot helps me keep my energy up.
Not to worry. The cooks here are very capable.
Twilight nodded in agreement before turning to Stephen.
Did you learn anything else about the thief?
She asked. Stephen responded by looking to Celestia.
According to him, he was your first apprentice, Princess Celestia.
Twilight gave her mentor a curious look.
Is that true?
Celestia let out a small sigh.
Yes. His name is Ernest Stalwart. He was the top student in my first class at the School of Gifted Unicorns. He designed Canterlot and personally oversaw most of its construction.
A series of bewildered reactions filled the room.
While him and his assistant did a lot of good, he was obsessed with expansion and enhancement. Eventually, his ambitions grew too big and I had to relinquish him as my student. I haven't seen him since. I had assumed he was gone forever.
Celestia turned to Stephen.
Did he tell you how he managed to live for so long?
Stephen nodded.
He fused with his sister's heart and gained a dragon's longevity. It's like a big gemstone in the middle of his chest.
Celestia lowered her head and gave a disapproving shake.
Ethelrog was such a sweetheart before she matured. Ernest told me he had buried her.
I guess all but one part. He says it's what she wanted. But if you don't mind my asking, Your Highness, what exactly is Tartarus?
Celestia nodded sagely and began speaking.
Before my sister and I became princesses, Equestria was ruled by Discord, the master of chaos.
Stephen raised an eyebrow.
That doesn't sound like it was much fun.
It certainly wasn't. He would twist the land, the weather, the food, the animals, even celestial bodies into anything he wanted. He was at his worst towards the end of his reign when he started creating monsters that would destroy anything in their path,
said Luna. Celestia continued.
When Luna and I discovered the elements of harmony, we stood up to discord and turned him into stone. Order was restored to nature, but for a time, discord's monsters ran free.
So Tartarus is their prison?
Stephen asked.
Yes, but there's more to it than that. With help from many of Equestria's greatest magicians, we were able to create the magical amplifiers that Ernest now possesses. The Stone of Sisyphus was essential in the creating of Tartarus and overpowering the monsters. The Eye of Chios saved us much time in hunting them down and rounding them up. The Globe of Atlas was the key to making sure their bonds in Tartarus were permanent.
excepting the one you kept unlocked,
Luna said with a hint of irritation in her voice.
Ah, yes.
Celestia smiled.
Cerberus was relatively easy to train considering the headaches all the other monsters gave us.
He's just a big, cuddly puppy.
Fluttershy spoke up.
I can't imagine him being any trouble at all.
Luna deadpanned.
Believe me, you do not wish to know what training him was like. I wanted to put him in Tartarus with the others and be done with it, but Celestia insisted we keep him.
Celestia rolled her eyes.
I thought he was cute and saw potential for good.
Then she smirked at Luna.
Was I wrong, dear sister?
Stephen tried to keep his eyes from bugging out in confusion.
That three-headed dog is cute?
Luna answered her sister with an exasperated sigh and then continued the story.
Anyway, after we trained Cerberus to round up the monsters should they escape, we had the magicians create an enchanted key that would seal the gate and make it almost impossible to open. Once the spells were written, we enchanted the key several times, each time adding more conditions that must be met in order for the key to be turned. What were those circumstances again, sister?
First, the pony must be willing to open the gate. Most ponies at least know what Tartarus is and know the destruction of Equestria would be devastating should the Titans be freed. Second, they must be sound mind and body. This makes sure the key can't be turned by ponies who are malicious, insane, or under mind control. Third, they must be an earth pony, since only a unicorn would be able to cast the spell on the artifacts to break the seal in the gate. If they are unable to turn the key, their efforts would be for nothing.
Then we hid the key in the most desolate part of Equestria where few ponies would venture.
Luna added proudly.
In a hidden chamber under a pyramid, cloaked with invisibility, and placed on an altar that would collapse were it removed. Truly, the many enchantments were an act of cunning.
So, how did Ernest know where to go and what to look for?
Applejack asked curiously. This time Celestia gave a disapproving sigh.
Ernest had the Eye of Chios located for him, but he wouldn't have known to look for the key if Merlin Lulamoon had refrained from writing down the plan like I asked him to.
Merlin was quite boastful of his contributions,
Luna added sagely.
His father was like that too. It runs in their family.
Celestia groaned.
But I found out that he didn't listen to me when news came out 50 years ago that some pony had found his journal, and now bits of it are in history books across Equestria. I already had them believing that the powers of the artifacts were merely legends, so I convinced them that Merlin was the one who originally wrote the story after being really proud of some sculptures he made.
Celestia stopped talking when the 4 waiters brought rolling dinner trays into the dining hall and served the orders. After the princesses started eating, everyone else began as well, and the conversation was low until Rainbow Dash asked,
So, why are we waiting to get this guy?
Celestia set down her levitating fork.
I still believe it's important that we take as much time as we can get to prepare. We can only guess what defenses Ernest has put up around his home, and it's best if we're ready for them.
Stephen hastily swallowed a large bite before speaking up.
Pardon me, Your Highness, but I don't think there's anything to worry about. Ernest gave me a tour of his fort. I didn't see anything except a 20-foot cobblestone wall.
Have you seen a single weapon since you came to Canterlot, Stefan?
Celestia asked. Stephen took the time to think with another bite.
No, ma'am, I haven't,
he said after swallowing.
The outer walls of Canterlot are laced with defenses against invasions, and the palace is riddled with traps that can be magically activated during an emergency. Barring a few exceptional circumstances, most threats wouldn't get close to the throne room. I have no reason to believe he wouldn't rig his home in the same way. Without my guidance, I doubt they'll be as tame as Canterlot's defenses. So I'd like to take plenty of time to make sure every pony is well fed, rested, debriefed, and ready before we go in.
Stephen looked down at his meal. His salad was gone and there wasn't much left of his burrito. He was feeling pleasantly full, even if still exhausted.
I don't think we can all be well rested, but this food is delicious, so being well fed shouldn't be a problem at all.
Why would we not all be well rested?
Luna asked.
Stephen hasn't been able to sleep since he first came here,
said Fluttershy.
Is that true?
Stephen nodded.
I had trouble following Ernest's explanation, but I think it has something to do with my mind being conscious while connected to both of my bodies.
Luna took a thoughtful expression.
If you're still around after dinner, come find me. I might be able to help you.
Anything would be welcome, Princess. Thank you.
Please, call me Luna.
Stephen nodded, and with that, everyone continued their meals. When they were finished, the waiters came and took their plates. The princesses excused themselves, and the other ponies got up to leave the dining hall. Stephen was entering thoughts of taking a nap under the cherry tree, where he had conversed with the princesses, when a pair of pink forelegs gingerly wrapped themselves around his neck. Stephen lost his balance for a brief moment when his head was pulled into Pinkie Pie's chest, turning his neck at an awkward angle.
What's up?
He asked.
You said that spell was gonna be broken from you. Who knows when you'll poof away from Equestria?
That is a good question,
Stephen said, while trying to gently tug away from Pinkie's embrace, before his neck strained itself. Pinkie held her grip.
This is your thanks for giving us an adventure hug. Just in case you don't give one before you leave.
Stephen tugged away, again, to no avail.
I'm glad you enjoyed my company.
Yep, we do.
Finally, Pinkie released him and started bouncing about. Stephen followed as he pulled the kinks out of his neck.
It's not often I have a reason to stay up with my friends for 2 nights in 1 week, or get to teach some pony how to dance, or get a run for my bits in card games. But you're the first to come from another world to join us.
With an extra high bounce, Pinkie turned to face Stephen.
Oh, what should we do while we wait for shining armor to get here?
She asked again, walking backwards towards the hallway.
Actually, I'm still reeling from all the traveling I've done today. I think I'll go rest for a little while. But if you'd come find me when the cavalry arrives, that would be great.
With another bounce and turn, she landed next to Stephen and walked by his side.
Okie dokie, Loki. Let me show you where the guest rooms are.
Stephen took the next couple of hours to rest and recuperate. This time he tried keeping his mind to more positive things, such as memories of good times with his friends. Inevitably, Selena occasionally passed through his mind. As much as he didn't want to, he'd have to move the thought along, before he dwelled on the fact that she wouldn't be there when he got back. It would just have to be something he dealt with when this was over. Surprisingly to him, some memories of his time in Equestria helped him smile while he rested. Despite everything that went wrong, parts of it were funny in retrospect. To think that at any moment he would wake up back on Earth, never to see them again, and not able to tell the story to anyone else. It was an interesting thought. After all they've done for him, wouldn't it be rude if he were to suddenly disappear without a proper thanks or goodbye? Not that he could ever properly thank them for anything, but something had to be done before it was too late. Now that he thought about it, Ernest was certainly taking his time with breaking that spell. Was it a complex process? Did something go wrong? What if something happened to his body on Earth? As far as he knew, he'd been lying in his bed for over 3 days. Does his body go to stasis when he's in Equestria? What if it doesn't? What if all the horrible implications that thought carried? The worst was easily the thought that he might have dehydrated himself to death. A dozen more questions ran through his mind, each scarier than the last. Remembering what Ernest said about this type of magic still being experimental, Stephen realized that there was possibly no way of knowing the answers to these questions beyond speculation. He would just have to roll with it and hope for the best. In the meantime, he had to properly thank his friends for helping him. Just as he was about to get up, there were 3 taps on the door.
Come in.
he called while hopping off the bed. The door swung open and revealed a bouncing Pinkie Pie on the other side.
They're here, so I'm coming to get you like you asked.
She chimed happily.
Sounds good. I was just about to get up.
Stephen followed Pinkie out of the room, through the castle, and onto a balcony where the group, the princesses, and several soldiers were standing at attention as several pegasus-drawn carriages pulled off into the sky. Each soldier had a glimmering brown coat and steel armour, except for the unicorn leader standing in front. The leader had a plain white coat and a gold-trimmed purple armour, two-toned blue hair spiked at the top, and down the back of what would otherwise appear to be a Trojan helmet. Stephen was momentarily surprised when Twilight trotted up to the leader and embraced him, but then he realised that this must be Shining Armour, Twilight's aforementioned brother who specialises in defensive magic. It gave Stephen a bit of comfort knowing that they were having a squad of trained soldiers accompanying them. Perhaps Ernest wouldn't do so well when he is the one being ambushed. When Celestia approached, the squad removed their helmets and bowed. Shining Armour was the only one to rise and greet her.
Princess, we came as fast as we could. We are ready to go whenever you are.
Celestia looked to Stephen.
Thank you, but there's been a slight change in plans. Stefan, would you step forward, please?
She asked gracefully. Stephen nervously walked towards the squad.
Yes, ma'am?
This is Stefan. Until just before Luna wrote to you, he was the only one who could turn the TARDIS gate key, but he has refused and will return to his home soon. We're safe for now, so please follow me and I'll tell you everything you need to know.
Luna spoke up.
Once we have drawn a strategy, you and your soldiers may rest from your journey and prepare for tomorrow.
Shining Armour nodded before twice clapping a rear hoof against the floor. His squad came back to attention and barked.
As you wish, princess.
With Celestia at the point, Shining Armour marched his squad into the castle. The next few hours were spent mingling with the group. Rainbow Dash had taken to practicing tricks in the garden. Fluttershy was wandering about and looking for some animals. Rarity went to the city to do some shopping for herself. Twilight took the opportunity to further practice her new shield technique, and Stephen found himself conversing with Pinkie Pie and Applejack. At one point, Rainbow Dash invaded Twilight's space and started zipping around her head like a fly.
Rainbow, what are you doing?
Twilight called out.
Heads up, Twilight!
Rainbow Dash shouted back before diving straight toward Twilight with a full-speed kick. Twilight threw up her plough shield at the last second. Rainbow bounced off the shield. With an aerial turn, she adjusted her angle and charged Twilight a second time. When Twilight deflected her again, Rainbow flipped back and went for a rear attack. Twilight blinked away at the last second, reappearing a few feet behind where she had been standing. She took a ready stance as Rainbow skidded to a halt against the ground. Applejack reared up and cheered for her friends, and Pinkie bounced while shouting.
That was amazing, you guys.
Rainbow chuckled and trotted up to Twilight.
Nice moves, Twilight. Your brother wanted me to make sure you were quick enough with those shields.
Twilight sighed in relief.
That's good, but you could warn me next time.
That's not a good way to practice, Twilight.
Shining Armour's voice came from behind Stephen. He turned around to just see in time the captain walk past him, naked, but wearing a big smile on his face. If it weren't for the hair colours and the voice, Stephen would have guessed him to be a completely different pony from the one he saw leading the squad.
You won't get a warning when you really need a shield.
Twilight ran up to her brother and greeted him.
How did the meeting go?
She asked happily.
It was a lot to take in, but it's nothing we can't handle. Looks like you're getting ready too. Been learning some new spells?
Yep.
Twilight said proudly.
It's designed to redirect all blunt force so it glances off without taking it head on.
Sounds cool. Can I see?
Twilight nodded and threw up the mana plough formation. Shining Armour glanced over it before tapping it a couple of times.
What do you think?
Twilight asked.
It looks pretty good. Mind if I try it out?
Go ahead.
Twilight turned to her friends.
You all might want to get behind me,
she said as Shining Armour took several steps back. Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, Applejack and Stephen rushed to get behind Twilight. Stephen found himself standing at her right flank, with a view of Shining Armour through the purple shield's ethereal veil. Shining Armor's horns started glowing brightly atop his head, and he pointed at them. Stephen's eyes were drawn to the apex of the shield. Stephen asked himself, as his eyes traced the angle of the shield, and followed the path towards the sky. There was a sound of a flaring Roman candle, as Shining Armor launched a small magic blast. Stephen looked down in time to see it strike the angled point of the shield with a heavy metallic sounding ding. The blast zipped about 20 feet diagonally over their heads, where it popped in the air like a bottle rocket. As he formed several similar blasts in a line, they seemed to be aimed towards each of them through the shield, and Twilight braced for impact. Stephen looked at a point on the shield directly in front of his face, and his eyes glanced back at the top of a tree on his right side. The sounds of shots being fired brought Stephen's attention back forward in time to see each blast ricochet off the shield in front of the others, where they would fly off in various directions and pop a few feet away. Stephen watched as the one that was aimed for him slid up the curve of the mana's plough form and displaced a few of the tree leaves when it exploded. Twilight's friends cheered and hugged her while she banished the shield, and Shining Armor galloped up to them.
Good job, Twilight!
He cheered and gave a playful punch.
What were those?
Twilight asked.
Practice blasts. They mimic the weight of high-powered magic blasts without being explosive, so a cadet's defenses can be tested safely. On most shields, they just explode, but I've never seen them slide off like that. I might have to borrow that spell from you. Did you come up with it yourself?
Some of it. The shape was actually Stephen's idea.
Really?
Shining Armor looked curiously to Stephen.
We were expecting to face a unicorn that could break Celestia's barriers with brute force. It was just a suggestion.
Stephen replied as plainly as possible, praying that he wouldn't be the next of Shining Armor's tests.
That's pretty awesome. It sounds like you've got a knack for this type of thing. Ever consider joining the guard?
Stephen shook his head.
I only just recently learned how to keep my feet under me, and I'm no good in a fight.
Shining Armor chuckled.
Don't worry, I'm just pulling your leg.
He turned and started trotting away.
I'm gonna go find a snack. Catch you guys later.
Not long afterwards, dinner was served. It was just as good as lunch, but Stephen spent most of the meal in a daze. Either the rest he had taken a few hours earlier had not been enough, or he had been going for so long that it was losing its effect. He was getting anxious to see what Luna had in mind to help him out. After the table was cleared, Luna beckoned Stephen to follow her. Out of the dining room, down several corridors, and up many flights of stairs. Stephen did his best to keep up with the princess. However, between his much shorter legs and generally slower pace, he found himself falling behind yet again. After the third flight of steps, Luna stopped and asked,
"Are you going to be all right?"
By now, Stephen was sweating, panting, and felt like he had to sprint in order to keep up with Luna's long strides. There wasn't any point in trying to hide it anymore.
Honestly, I don't know.
He leaned against a wall and tried to catch a second wind.
I'm just so exhausted.
He spoke in between breaths. Luna backtracked down the steps until she was next to him.
"Allow me to help. There's only 20 steps to go,"
she promised, holding out a foreleg. Stephen wrapped his foreleg around hers and leaned onto it, and with a tug, Luna helped him up the next step, and continued to do so towards the top of the tower. Eventually they reached the top of the tower, and walked through a glass door. Stephen found himself on a balcony that overlooked the garden. Catching his breath, Stephen sat down and leaned against the railing. There, he caught sight of Celestia standing on the balcony of another tower on the west side of the garden. He wondered for a moment what she was doing, before Luna tapped him on the shoulder. Looking up to her, he saw her horn was glowing.
"Please, relax and accept this as thanks for not turning the key,"
she said, as she lowered her head towards him.
Wait, what's going on?
Stephen asked, uncertain of Luna's advance. Luna's head tilted down further, and her horn touched the top of his mane. Suddenly, Stephen found himself unable to move as a warm sensation flooded him from head to hooves. A faint electrical tingle ran through his body, and he felt blood rush to his cheeks. He wasn't certain how long this went on for, but it was the type of strange sensation that he didn't want to stop. Eventually, Luna removed her horn. It took a moment of Stephen to process everything, But when he did, a wide smile came to his face. His eyes were clear and focused. His head no longer swam, felt weighted or ached. He sprang to his feet, the same in a manner similar to that of a child getting out of bed on Christmas morning. With a stretch and a big yawn, Stephen felt awake for the first time in over a week.
Feeling better?
I feel amazing. What did you do?
He asked excitedly.
It's a high-level rejuvenation spell. You looked as though you may soon succumb to your exhaustion, so I gave you a little energy.
How?
Stephen asked curiously.
As Princess of the Night, it is my duty to guard my subjects from nightmares, so I too must occasionally go a night or two without rest. There is magical energy everywhere in Equestria, even in the sky. Those who know how may borrow that magical energy, so long as we do so without greed. The energy I've given you will only last a day, but it should be all we need to ensure that you make it through the trials ahead.
Stephen was at a loss for words for a moment. He had no idea anything like this was possible. But there was no denying how much better he felt. However this world worked, he was starting to like it, regardless of whether or not he could understand it.
This is awesome, Luna. I can't thank you enough.
Luna gave him a smile.
Now then, would you like to see something truly awesome?
He briefly wondered what could possibly be better than what had just happened before declaring.
Certainly.
Stephen watched as Luna turned around and looked toward Celestia. She waved for a moment, and Celestia responded with a wave of her own. When Celestia put down her foreleg, her horn started glowing. At first, it was faint in the distance, but soon it grew in intensity, until it was like a shimmering star that could very clearly be seen across the garden. Stephen watched her intently, trying to figure out what she was doing, but something seemed off. Taking his eyes off Celestia and looking around, he could see the shadows of the towers growing long towards the east. This brought his attention up, and his eyes close to the sun, as he could without burning them. Shielding himself from the light, his brain almost completely refused to believe what he was seeing, as the sun rapidly descended towards the west. Shaking the spots out of her eyes, he turned and looked back at Celestia, who had lowered her horn, so it was pointing towards the ground. The humming sound that always came with Twilight's magic filled Stephen's ears. He turned around again and saw Luna standing tall, eyes closed, horn aglow, and wings stretched out wide. Suddenly she crouched, and Stephen flinched as she leapt over his head. He watched in fascination as she dived towards the ground, only to sharply pull up a few feet from landing. Her wings flapped rhythmically as she rose straight up over the tower, muzzle and forelegs stretched towards the darkening sky. The sun disappeared over the western horizon. Stephen's mind blanked as stars became visible in the sky, only to be slightly drowned out by the light of the enormous moon rising from the east. For a moment, Luna's flapping figure was perfectly silhouetted in the center of the celestial body, high above the tower. Then, as if it were nothing, she glided back to the balcony.
What do you think?
She said, with an expectant smile. Stephen's mouth was starting to get dry from hanging open for so long.
I think I'll never get over how different this world is from mine, but that was definitely the coolest thing I've ever seen,
he said, as soon as his eyes adjusted to the new lighting. Luna's smile brightened.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
She gave him a small bow.
But now I must tend to my duties. Go rest and see to it that you don't squander your energy. Tomorrow shall be most eventful.
Stephen returned the bow.
Thanks again, Luna,
he said happily, before turning around, walking through the glass doors. As happy as he was to be awake, he still felt a need to thank his friends for everything they've done, since he had forgotten to do so at dinner. It took a bit of self-discipline to heed Luna's directions and not bound down the steps with all of his new energy. While Stephen didn't misspend the energy, he didn't waste it either. As he was strolling through the castle, Rarity returned from her ventures in the city, with bags of fabric in tow.
Hey, Rarity,
he called out to her.
Stephen, you're looking rather chipper. Are you feeling better?
Much better. Luna's magic worked wonders.
I'm glad to hear that. Say, since you're feeling better, would you like to help me get my supplies to my suite?
Certainly.
Stephen responded happily. Rarity levitated a couple of her bags over to his back and led him through the castle. They spent the next hour or so conversing about her day and having her teach him about the different materials she'd bought. Stephen slightly noticed that, as he talked, how much more clear his mind seemed and how much easier it was to hold interest and pay attention to what Rarity was saying. As the conversation came to a close, Rarity gave a comment about beauty sleep and sent him off. Stephen made sure to thank her for everything in case he didn't see her again, and continued on his stroll. In the garden he found Twilight and Fluttershy, and joined them in their conversation while they walked. They shifted from different types of plants and animals in the garden to telling Stephen stories of past experiences here, all of which were hilarious. As Twilight finished the story of having one of her birthday parties here, they noticed a pony's figure sneaking away from the garden's shed.
What's going on?
Twilight called out. A startled gasp from a raspy voice responded. Twilight lit up her horn and caught Rainbow Dash in the light. She was carrying full saddlebags.
Is something wrong, Rainbow Dash?
Fluttershy asked. Rainbow flew up to them, holding out her front hooves and shushing Fluttershy.
Quiet!
She said with a loud whisper.
I'm trying to sneak up on Pinkie Pie.
Why?
Fluttershy asked curiously.
I need to outdo that prank she got me with last Monday, and I've got the perfect idea.
She said deviously.
In fact, I could use a little help.
Twilight rolled her eyes.
I don't want any part of this. It's getting late.
Twilight turned to walk away. Rainbow turned to her other friend.
How about you, Fluttershy?
Oh, thank you for considering me, but I'm really no good with pranks. Twilight's right, though. It is getting late. Just be careful and you can tell me all about it later.
Fluttershy said softly.
All right.
Rainbow gave a disappointed sigh. She then looked at Stephen.
Well, what about you? Want to help me?
Are you certain this is a good idea?
Stephen asked. Rainbow scoffed.
We do this type of stuff to each other all the time. Come on, it'll be fun.
She exclaimed as she tried to tug him along. When Stephen didn't follow right away, Rainbow turned and held her forelegs out to him.
Please?
With some thought, Stephen figured that Rainbow's prank was innocent enough and followed along. After all, it was just one more fun thing to do during his last night in Equestria.
Alright, as long as it's nothing too bad.
Don't get in too much trouble, Rainbow Dash.
Twilight called out as she walked away.
Oh, hang on just a second.
Stephen zipped over to Twilight and Fluttershy to give them the same thanks he had given Rarity. Once they welcomed him and bid him good night, they were back on their way, and Stephen turned to Rainbow Dash. Armed with the tools that Rainbow procured from the garden shed, the two made some minor adjustments to the shower head in Pinkie's room. After a quick test to see that their plan would work, Stephen and Rainbow attempted to flee the scene. However, they were stopped at the room's doorway when Pinkie appeared with a delighted,
Hey, Dashy! What you up to?
Rainbow hovered just over Pinkie's head, and her eyes were looking at everything but Pinkie Pie. Scratching the back of her head.
Oh, just looking for some more shampoo. Yeah. My bathroom's out of it, so I thought I'd borrow some of yours. But I couldn't find any here either.
Rainbow stammered out. Pinkie giggled.
You're silly. If you needed some, all you had to do was ask.
Pinkie happily trotted into her room. As soon as she turned the corner into the bathroom, Rainbow scooped up Stephen and flew out of the closest window.
Hey!
Stephen let out a startled gasp, only to be shushed by Rainbow. She propped them both down just under the windowsill and waited quietly, with their backs against the wall.
What are you talking about, Dashy? The shampoo is right here.
They heard Pinkie call out from inside.
Rainbow Dash?
She asked a moment later.
Where'd you go?
Another second passed and Rainbow Dash said nothing.
Oh well, more for me.
Pinkie chirped. Rainbow stifled a chuckle and peered through the window. Stephen looked up too, and saw Pinkie trot into her bathroom and close the door. A wide, devilish grin came to Rainbow Dash's face when the sound of water jets came through the door. Stephen kept his eyes peeled for about 10 seconds. Just as he was starting to wonder if he should be staring at Pinkie's bathroom door, a shrill scream! And Rainbow burst into laughter, interrupting his thoughts. The bathroom door burst open. From a cloud of steam came a raging and soaking wet Pinkie Pie that was now sporting a sky blue mane and coat from her head to the middle of her back. As much as Stephen wanted to laugh, he figured it would be a good idea to let Pinkie calm down first. He tried to get Rainbow to hide again, but she was too swept up in the hilarity of her prank. Stephen's attempt at shoving her back into hiding had no effect. But the sudden "Rainbow Dash!" coming from inside the room instantly gained her attention. Still cracking up, Rainbow jumped up and spread her wings. Stephen scrambled to get away. Before either of them could get far, a blue and pink blur snatched Rainbow out of the air and brought her down on top of Stephen. The tangled mess of fur and feathers rolled a couple of times before unravelling itself, with Pinkie Pie holding down her friends, a hoof on each of their chests.
How could you do this to me?
She asked, staring into them with wide eyes.
That's what you get for giving me those cupcakes baked with hot sauce and switching my milk with watered mayonnaise.
Rainbow shot back in mid-chuckle.
It took all day to get that taste out of my mouth.
But I'm Pinkie Pie. I can't be Pinkie Pie if I'm blue. What would that make me?
How about blueberry pie?
Stephen blurted out. Pinkie froze for a moment. Stephen and Rainbow exchanged worried glances just before Pinkie snorted and then burst into laughter. She fell over next to Rainbow Dash and tried to catch her breath in between pals.
You guys are too funny!
Rainbow started laughing with her. Seeing that no harm was done, Stephen relaxed and started laughing with them as well. Eventually, Pinkie let out a loud sigh and got back to her feet. She tried to shake herself dry while Stephen and Rainbow got up as well.
Looks like you got me!
Rainbow chuckled.
Don't worry, Pinks. That dye will wash out in the morning.
This one's gonna be hard to top, Dashy! You better be ready!
I'm always ready.
Rainbow boasted.
But for now, I'm gonna hit the sack. See you two later.
Rainbow Dash, wait!
Stephen called out before she could take off. Rainbow stopped and turned around.
What's up?
I'm actually surprised I'm still here. So, in case I go back home sometime tonight, I just wanted to thank you all for all the help you've given me.
Don't sweat it.
Rainbow said confidently, while holding out a hoof. Stephen reached out and bumped it.
I told you we've got your back. Good luck if we don't see you.
With that, Rainbow took off and Pinkie gave him another hug.
Maybe Twilight will amuse her bath,
she said with a giggle.
See you in the morning, Stefan!
She called out as she bounded away. The next friend he found was Applejack. She was walking back to her room and balancing a dish of small pastries atop her hat.
Hey, Applejack, getting yourself a snack?
Stephen called out.
You bet.
Applejack smiled.
Nothing like a good snack before hitting the hay. You want to grab one for yourself?
Certainly. Thank you.
She asked, lowering her head. Stephen grabbed one of the pastries from the plate and bit into it. It was a small apple pie, like the ones served at fast food restaurants, but tasted way better.
I'm feeling more alive than I've felt in weeks and just got done hanging out with all the others. Is there anything you want to do?
Applejack chuckled.
Sounds fun, buddy. But I'm plumb tuckered and itching for some shut-eye. You gonna ride out with us tomorrow?
I haven't really thought about that. Honestly, I don't even know if I'll still be around. So if you're going to bed, I should probably say goodnight and...
Applejack raised a hoof to stop him.
Don't you worry none, Sugar Cube. I already heard about you going around and gracing us with your thanks like you ain't gonna see us again. If you want to thank us, do it by making sure you get home safe. Sound good?
Stephen wasn't certain why, but he didn't entirely agree with Applejack. However, Applejack wanted to go to bed, so instead of pressing the issue, he simply nodded.
Sounds good, Applejack. Sleep well.
With that, Applejack walked into her room, waved goodbye to Stephen, and shut the door. Stephen wandered back to his room and laid down quietly for the rest of the night. At first his thoughts started out down another path of what had become of his body back on Earth. But this train of thought only lasted for a little while, before he realised that unless his body had gone into complete stasis, there's no way that this would end well. Sparing himself the crippling suspense of not knowing what was going on, Stephen switched tracks to what he was going to do in the morning. Part of him wanted to stay as far away from the battle as possible, but there was a small part of him that wanted to go, just to make sure he saw Ernest get detained with his own eyes. As he thought about today's conversation with Ernest, a strange feeling rose within him. He could feel his muscles clench and his heart rate pick up slightly. The only other times he felt anything similar to this was when he faced the Timberwolves and during the ambush at the pyramid. But this was different. This feeling wasn't intense or nerve-wracking. This feeling brought Stephen a level of determination and focus that he had never felt before. Was it because Ernest's ambition set into motion a series of events that caused Stephen incredible pain and loss over the last few weeks? Yes, but there was more to it than that. Was it because Ernest's ambitions were misguided and destructive on top of just plain ludicrous? Yes, but these reasons were still insufficient. Was it because soon as the spell wore off, he would go home? But why would that be a problem? As soon as Stephen goes home, he has to go about rebuilding his life. A task that could very easily prove more arduous than anything encountered in Equestria. Putting those thoughts aside, Stephen remembered that Ernest knew what went wrong with the Spirit Traveller spell, and would not likely make the same mistakes again. As soon as Stephen goes home, Ernest will bring another human directly to his fortress and have them turn the key. That person would be sent on their way and wake up thinking it was all a dream, just as Stephen had done initially. Meanwhile, Equestria would be destroyed by an army of ancient monsters. That was it. That was why these new feelings of righteous indignation were swelling up within him. This went beyond Stephen's problems, or even the risk of having Ernest do the same thing to someone else. If Ernest isn't stopped, Equestria will be torn, and all the efforts that his friends have been put into him will have been for nothing. The memories of how Stephen froze when he came face to face with the Timberwolf flashed through his head. The pang of guilt rose up again as he remembered how his complacency almost cost Applejack her sister. Stephen might never live that down in his own heart. It would be impossible to carry the guilt of an entire nation destroyed by his selfishness. The Timberwolves weren't even really his fight, but Ernest had practically hand-picked Stephen as a test subject in his deranged plan. He was the true victim here. This is what Stephen's fight more than anyone else. Regardless of what the consequences may be, he would make sure that he was the only victim. Stephen chuckled and chided himself. Why did he think that the quality time he spent with the group today and the goodbyes he gave to them would be sufficient as thanks by themselves? The only way he could properly thank his friends would be to try and help them as much as possible, as they have helped him. Even if he weren't much of a fighter, even if it was just for moral support, he would be there and do his best. Not just feeling more awake than he had ever felt since the ordeal began, but feeling more awake than he had ever felt before. Stephen hopped out of bed and walked into the garden, just in time to see Celestia and Luna take their posts on the castle towers. This time Celestia was on the east, and Luna was on the west. Stephen watched as Luna lowered her glowing horn to the west, and Celestia flew into the sky. The princesses dragged the celestial bodies across the sky with their movements. It was just as amazing as the first time he had seen it, about 11 hours previously, and he could still hardly believe it. Breakfast was eaten with his friends, the princesses and Shining Armor's squad. Stephen filled up on strawberry pancakes and fruit salad. Once the table was cleared, the princesses led the group to the same balcony where the soldiers had landed the day before. They waited and engaged in light conversation for about an hour before Shining Armor and his squad appeared, armoured and ready to go.
Is every pony ready?
Celestia asked. The group nodded. Shining Armor and his squad saluted. Celestia signalled them at ease, and then turned to Stephen with a curious glance.
Are you going to join us, Stephen?
Stephen narrowed his eyes, smiled confidently, and puffed out his chest.
Your Highness, count me in.
And a howling thank you to my Patreons.